Greetings, followers. Law here from Facebook's D&D Memes page, and this is my very first episode of D20 Questions. I'd like to thank all of you who submitted questions via email. We got some really great ones. And I'd just like to start by saying that it doesn't matter to me what edition you play or what version of tabletop role-playing you partake in. As long as you and your friends are together, playing games and having a good time, you're doing it right. Let's start with the first question. Ryan Ragor asks, does lava count as fire damage or something else? I'm playing 3.5/Arcanus right now, and there was an ability for you to be able to not take any fire damage at all. One of the players asked the question, and now I'm curious. Well, the short answer is, since you specified you're playing 3.5, yes, resistance to fire does give you resistance to lava. It says pretty clearly an immunity or resistance to fire serves as an immunity to lava or magma. And this is probably true in most other editions, even if they don't specify clearly, because you will notice that most monsters that are lava-themed do in fact deal extra fire damage. That being said, if you're a dungeon master and you're trying to get the party damaged with lava, and someone throws a cog in the works by giving themselves fire immunity, you can just have something drag them down into it, because they still need to breathe, and lava is a viscous liquid. Our next question is from Chris Spears, whose very name deals piercing damage. Why do so many folks dislike 4th edition yet hail Pathfinder as the end-all be-all? Well, that seems like a bit of a subjective question, because there are a lot of people who do really like 4th edition. I mean, each edition has its own benefits and perks. Some things function better in some editions, some things function worse in other editions. But as long as you're playing the one that you have the most fun in, you're playing the right one. I feel like a lot of people, say, in my age category, really got into D&D with 3rd edition because it was the one that came out while you were around high school age, when your brain really started to get the full grasp of how it worked. Now, I've played every edition since the beginning, but that doesn't mean I don't have preferences. And I feel like Pathfinder is loved by many, but I'd encounter even more people who put 3rd edition or 3.5 up on a higher pedestal. Again, it doesn't matter to me which edition you play. As long as your group functions well and tells a good story, then you're doing it right. Now, Pathfinder did solve some problems that it seemed a large majority of people had with some rules in 3rd edition and 3.5, and it creates a lot more customization. Some people like that, but again, there are pros and cons to every edition. So choose the one you like best, but my real advice is to try all of them very seriously, devote the time to learn them, and then move on to what you like best or rotate. Here's a question from Manuel Seraph. Hey, I've always wondered. It doesn't matter which system, but always, every time, why the heck does Grapple pause the game to look up rules? I feel like Grapple tends to be a bit of a roadblock sometimes because it tends to create a different kind of combat within a regularly flowing combat. Most of us are used to regular turn-based combat where we have an action, we have a move, we can cast a spell, we can attack, and we can partake in what's happening in the battlefield. With Grapple, it usually starts with some kind of combat-related DC to initiate it, and then moves on to a roll-off in a physical challenge between you and the person that you're grappling with. Now, this effectively takes you and your enemy and pulls you out of the battle and creates a kind of new addition of rules that are happening within the normal fight. Now, for some reason, this seems to slow things down because it just seems so different from the regular flow that happens in every single game. Now, if you want to simplify the rules, then I suggest you just brew up a fresh pot of homebrew and do it that way. Now, you can just make it a simple d20 versus d20 every single turn, which is how some editions do function. Or you can just have it be a cinematic thing, have them roll 1d20 for how well they do in combat, and describe what happens. Although simplifying things in this way can encourage people to try to break the game, so beware and keep your DM hand strong. Here's a question from Mike from Adventures of Zip. Hey guys, so I was wondering if cross-edition rules mix and matching is ever a thing that can be done with minimal issue, or if it's just kind of a big disaster waiting to happen. He goes on to specify that they're going to start playing 5th edition, and that he's going to be DMing for the first time, and some of his players are used to playing 3.5, and he wants to use that skill set because he doesn't like the way 5th edition does skills. A common complaint. Now, if you'd like to use the skill set from 3.5 or 3rd edition and bring it into 5th edition, do just that. Replace all the skills with the ones you have in 3rd edition, and instead of using a proficiency bonus and class proficiencies, just give them skill ranks per level based on their class, like they do in 3.5. That is one nice thing about 5th edition, is it's so bare bones that it's very easy to take rules you like from old editions and just copy and paste them over the top. Our next question is from Christopher Lopez, who asks, has anyone tried their hands at modern D&D that includes mechs as the main focus? What's the experience like, and what would you like to change? As far as I've seen, there are many complaints about calculating hardness, followed by a frowny face. Now, mechs in a modern D&D game just tweaks the logical part of my brain that wants to say that we are in a modern game right now and we don't have any mechs. So it would technically be a future game, if you'll pardon my syntax correction. Well, things like mechs can definitely be a headache for a dungeon master, unless that's the kind of game they're running. There are games out there already that have rules for operating mechs. There are games out there that have rules for spaceships and sci-fi combat. They aren't necessarily Dungeons & Dragons, but that doesn't mean you can't look at the rules from them and get ideas. Now, if you have to have a party in a mech in your D&D game, I suggest trying to bring some of the rules away from that. Don't give them stats for the mech, just have them roll some d20s to see how well they operate it, and tell them what happens. Actually giving those kind of things damage and hit points seems like a way to break the game. If you introduce a tank that deals 10d20 damage into your game, then one of your party members is going to really want a tank that deals 10d20 damage. If you show them a shiny, they will want that shiny. Have it be maybe a climax to a big game. Let them be inside of a giant mechanical monster, or maybe even a stone golem of some kind. I suggest referencing Chris Perkins' live acquisition games at PAX. I believe 2 years ago he did one where they piloted a giant stone statue of an evil wizard, and he just had them roll some d20s to fight the Tarrasque. And it was cool and cinematic, and it just made simple sense. It didn't have to bring complicated stats into the actual mechs themselves. But let me know what you try, and let me know if it works, because it's always fun to hear about people's creative process and seeing the outcome. Now, our last question is from Daniel Summers. And pardon me if I paraphrase this one, but it is a very long email. A few friends of mine are currently running a Pathfinder campaign that should be ending very soon so that we can start a fresh new story. There's been talk between me and the DM about possibly running a D&D campaign simultaneously with the same group. I was wondering if you guys had any experience with similar structures or any input as to whether this may or may not work well. Mostly I'm afraid that the 13 days between plot points would make the story more difficult to follow sometimes, especially if we don't get through a full night's encounters. And I really don't want to end up weakening the group more than anything. I'd appreciate any tips or insight you guys might have to offer. Y'all do cool stuff, and I like you. Thanks, guys. And thank you, Daniel Summers, for those kind words. Now, this is exactly how the current game group that I play with operates. We have a rotating DM that takes over once per week, or if we're really tight in the story and we want to move through, sometimes we'll do it 2 weeks in a row. It's always discussed between games via Facebook, usually, to see who's running next. Now, one thing I like to do to keep the story fresh between games and let your players continue being their characters even outside of game day is to create a blog, something like Blogger or Obsidian Portal, and invite all of the players as authors to this blog. They can post journal entries from their character's point of view between games, and you, the Dungeon Master, can post images of NPCs, magic items, maps, or little story arcs, cinematic intros to the upcoming game that can keep the flavor fresh and keep everyone remembering what happened at the last game and learning insight to what happens inside their characters' minds. I know I go back all the time and read old blogs that we had during games to read my character's journal entries and his party members' journal entries. It's very nostalgic, and it helps me remember how to make characters and what really motivates them and drives them. Well, I thank you for all of your questions, and I hope that you will send me more. Simply send them to d20question@gmail.com. And I'll see you on Facebook as I create more ridiculous images with funny captions to try to make you laugh and get as much attention as I possibly can.